Yo, 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 what's good? So, welcome to Real Shit, the series where we talk about real shit, right? So, first episode is going to cover Welcome to NHK and some topics surrounding that. I think the main goal of this series is for me to just practice talking to the mic and being unscripted and being just very direct. So, this episode is going to be very personal and it's probably going to go in a bunch of different directions, but remember, in my introduction video, I said that this is going to be very rough. It's going to be like the rough draft, and this is the part where you guys comment and tell me if you would want to make this like a scripted video. So let's get into it. So in order to talk about Welcome to N.H.K, I think it's important for me to really talk about myself and my own situation to understand why I kind of even decided to watch this in the first place. I don't really watch a lot of anime, but I feel like the topic at hand in this anime was kind of something that I've been thinking about for a while and kind of living through, to be honest, in my own life. So if you clicked on this video and you don't know what Welcome to the NHK is, it's pretty much about a Hikikomori or a shut-in or a NEET, I guess you could say, being reintegrated into society, or at least attempting to. So it's very relevant to today because we kind of had a global pandemic for 2 years. Crazy to say that now, but it's almost been 2 years. I've been thinking about how I was going to approach this because I know a lot of people are going to come in and say, well, it's okay because everybody had to be a shut-in when the pandemic started, but I was kind of doing this before that, you know, on some Soulja Boy shit. I was the first one. In 2019, I guess, is when I kind of started having more tendencies of that. I definitely wasn't a shut-in to the extent where I wouldn't leave my room for like days on end. I would go out and run every day and I would go get like groceries and stuff like that, but I really just didn't socialize. I think this is more about socialization rather than just being in my room and not functioning in society. 'Cause I definitely was able to function and did function, but it was mainly that I would just feel more comfortable being in my room and doing my own thing rather than just going out and actively trying to socialize. So I'm not like incompetent or anything like that, so don't worry about that. I'm kind of out of that now, hopefully, unless this next variant comes through and hits us, whatever it's called. I hope that doesn't happen, but I guess that's another point I should make here, is that I'm not going to be coming in here being like, oh no, society's against me and self-pitying or anything. This is me reflecting on the past few years of my life and seeing that in this anime and taking it more as like a cautionary tale instead of, oh, he just like me for real or anything like that, or, you know, just trying to blame something else such as society or the NHK on my own problems when they're really my own problems for a reason. So in order for everyone to understand why this story really resonated with me, I think it's important to understand where I'm coming from in my own background. So throughout high school and like the end of middle school, I was really involved in a lot of different clubs. So I was in orchestra, I was in track, cross country, I was in yearbook for a minute, I was the historian for like our orchestra, and I was also interviewing a lot of people because of journalism and yearbook. So I was pretty social, and I really felt like a lot of the time my only socialization was in those clubs, and I didn't really socialize with anyone outside of those clubs. I think that the only time that I would ever talk to anyone outside of these clubs is if they had a common interest with me. So I think a big thing to understand here is that a lot of my friends were based on common interest rather than just me going out and trying to meet new people. It would always be because I was already near them, because we were in orchestra, we were in track, we were in yearbook, we were in all these things that had a common interest. So I've always struggled with making friends with people who I didn't know were already there for the same thing. So making friends with just random people off the street was something I've never ever done until recently, like really recently, because I've always been a part of these clubs when I was growing up. Key point here, number one, is that I've always been involved in clubs and organizations, and I never had to socialize outside of that. Key point two is that I've always really found an extrovert, and I've always had them introduce me to new people. So I've never really had to make friends for myself. So that's another important key factor here. And then three, I've always been very introverted and I've always enjoyed my own company. As soon as I'm out of orchestra, as soon as I'm out of track, I'm at home, I'm in my room, I'm making music, I'm playing a game. So I've always enjoyed my own company when I don't have to be somewhere. If I'm not required to be somewhere, I'm not going to, you know, be there most of the time. I'm going to go straight home. Which, you know, in high school was fine because you're there for 8 to 10 hours a day and you can just go home because you've socialized for 8 to 10 hours. But in college, like that transitionary period is what I really want to talk about here, because after high school and senior year, you don't have to be in class. You can be in class for an hour and then just dip. And I've always conditioned myself to do that when I was in high school and growing up, because I would have all these extracurricular things to go to, and then I would be exhausted and go home and it would be fine. But when I went to college, it was the opposite effect, because I was like, oh, well, I don't have to be for an hour. I'm going to be here for just an hour and then dip. I didn't do anything extra, which I think is a big part of why a lot of people end up becoming hikikomoris or shut-ins, or, you know, just becoming very reclusive by nature. I think that another important factor to why a lot of people end up becoming shut-ins, or just very, I don't even want to use the word shut-in. I want to use, like, I guess I'll say that, but just why people become very reclusive is because we're just really comfortable in our own homes today because of technology. So I think a big factor of that is online gaming and just Discord, and I guess Skype era too, where we could just be connected to each other at any given moment. We didn't really have to leave the house to interact with each other anymore. That is a huge factor into why a lot of people become this way. And me personally, I'm going to talk about that a lot in a minute, but I've always really been into online gaming, and in recent years not so much, because I feel like a lot of the time my ties to these online games have been strictly social and not because I genuinely enjoy the game, which may or may not be a common occurrence for a lot of people. This topic of video games and socialization and the rise of that during the 7th generation of games is something I really want to talk about, so I'll probably make a video on that in the future. But to recap on, I guess, my high school experience, number one, I was always a part of organizations, so orchestra, track, cross country, journalism. And then 2, all my friends were extroverts, and I would have them introduce me to new people. 3, I would talk on Skype or Discord with my friends and keep in contact that way when I was at home. And 4, I would really just go straight home and not talk to anyone outside of those organizations. So remember those 4 points because they're important. So somewhere around the end of my junior year of high school, which was 2017, I found out that we were going to move to Seattle by the end of the year. So that would mean that I was going to move as soon as my senior year started. And that was really big for me because I was going to be moving away from all of my friends as soon as I was about to be leaving them in the first place. So it felt kind of like I was being ripped away from that, and I didn't get to have the gratification of like graduating with all these people that I built bonds with in my childhood, because I'd known most of these people since elementary school, because I'd grown up with the same people since, you know, first grade. So this was a 10-year thing. So to be ripped away from that was a pretty big deal for me, and I think that's the biggest reason as to why I just kind of lived the life I did for the past 4 years. But I didn't tell anyone I was moving until the last month before I was actually moving. Eventually, that October in 2017, I moved and I went to Seattle, which is the polar opposite of where I was staying at, both in demographics, weather, the way people talk, everything. Just everything was the polar opposite of Texas, which was really isolating for me because obviously Texas has more black people. And going from that to Seattle, where I'm actually a minority, like I was the only black person in multiple classes. I've never had that happen to me before. So going from that to going to that in Seattle was pretty big for me, and I felt very isolated. Another thing about the high school that I transferred to is that their curriculum for some reason was 2 years behind the Texas curriculum. So I was having to take classes that I'd already taken before as a sophomore in high school, as a senior in Seattle, which made no sense. And the only reason I had to take it was because they don't require a fitness credit in Texas, but they do in Seattle. So I had to stay in there for 1 credit for I don't know how many months. And that really just destroyed my mental, because I was like, dude, I'm in school for no reason and there's nothing I can do about it. In those few months, it was, in reality, it was what, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June. It was really, oh God, I guess it was 9 months. That's a long time. Never mind. I was like, it was only a few months, but it was 9 months of me just being in school for no reason. So when I graduated, I felt really no kind of gratification, and I felt like I had wasted almost a year just doing nothing, which was really my own fault because there was so much that I could have done. I could have just done something outside of school. It didn't have to just be about school. I could have volunteered. I could have been a part of more organizations, but I just decided to sit at home all day. But this whole time that I was in high school, because social media exists, I was able to see my friends just having fun, doing all these parties and everything, and graduating. And I felt really jealous about that. And I just felt left behind. And I really felt like everyone else was doing better than me instead of just focusing on myself, which felt awful and still does to this day. Even then, like, I would be on Discord and my friends would be making plans, and I obviously couldn't hang out with them, right? Because I live halfway across the country. And so my only time to talk with them was really on the game, or just texting them or just calling them. And I felt like that's no substitute for the real thing. And I just felt really bad that it would never be like that again. But around that time, a plan came into my head where I would eventually just, try to go back to Texas, I guess. And I think the biggest thing about me from that time was that I was really hung up on just going back to how things were instead of just moving on. That is the biggest takeaway that I have from any of this, and anything like this is the biggest thing that I've learned over the past 4 years, is that I just needed to move on. I needed to learn how to start from zero and then just build up, because I'm in a better position right now than I would be in Texas. Like, financially, just opportunity wise, there's so much more out here for me than there ever will be and ever was in Texas. And I always do that, but I would just be so hung up on these people that probably don't even honestly care about me anymore to that extent, that it's like I wasted so much time on that. And to bring it back to Welcome to the N.H.K, I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of people get hung up on and really just has them stagnate or just recluse themselves, is just not giving up on the past. Because that's the biggest thing about Welcome to N.H.K, is Sato is so fixated on how things used to be rather than how things can be, and he really limits himself. That's another thing too, is just limiting yourself. So next on the timeline is when I started college. So that was about 2018, like late 2018 going into 2019. Around that time, I really did try to go out more and try to get more involved in the college, but I wasn't really like vibing with anyone, I guess. So I kind of just went back home like every day. I still tried to get out every once in a while, but I just never found anyone I really resonated with. Instead, what I did to fill that void was try to talk to my old friends on Discord and just play games with them. My schedule ended up being like I would go to school, so I would go and play League with them when I got home, because it would be like 2 o'clock by the time I got home, their time. And we would just play League until like 7, 8, and I would do homework. So it was just this cycle of me just rushing home to play League with them, which is not a good substitute, which is why I love the times that I have League, but I have a disdain for that game and like the damage it did to my social, because man, that game did damage to my social, man. It's crazy. I will say though that for me personally, me like being on Discord and just having that Discord culture where you get on Discord and you play games together really messed up my socialization skills, because if there's not like a game or a movie or an event where everyone gets online together, it's kind of hard for me to just individually talk to certain people. Not everybody, obviously, but certain people. It's just like, I'm not going to talk to you unless we're playing the game. Which, do you guys feel that, honestly? Because I don't see a lot of people talk about that, and I think that that's something that we need to talk about more. Maybe it's just a me thing. I don't know. Let me know. But at the start of 2020, so the pandemic hit, that relationship of me just playing League with them all day, that kind of ended. So I stopped playing League as a whole, which was great, amazing. Character development already, right? It was amazing. But that gave me a lot of time to think and a lot of time to myself, because that was my primary friend group, quote unquote, that I was, playing games with and trying to socialize with. So I didn't have that anymore. And it made me really think about my relationship with that group, because I was really only talking to them because, one, they were old friends, right? So I felt obligated to keep talking to them, because I didn't realize at the time you can just outgrow people. So development 1 right there. But 2, I was really only talking to them out of convenience, because, like, not even afraid to say it, they were toxic as hell. Like, their entire group was just not good for anybody's mental health. or at all, just anything. It was terrible. They were toxic, and I was really just talking to them because I didn't want to talk to anyone else, and I was scared to talk to other people. But it was around this time where I really realized that I just don't really have a set friend group, and I honestly never really did have one, because I always feel like I've never been a part of a really close friend group, I guess. I've always had individual friends and like people I care about, but it was really never more than like 3 or 4 people. So I've never really been a part of a big friend group, and I always felt like I've been on the outskirts of friend groups, but I've never been inside of one, if that makes sense. So like I was on the outside of the orchestra group, I was on the outside of the track group, I was on the outside of the yearbook group, you know, but I was never integrated into it. I just kind of jumped between a bunch of different groups, which there's nothing wrong with that. You don't even need a really big friend group, to be honest. Like, it's just fine to be an individual and to just stick to yourself. So when the year started, I was like, okay, I don't have this anymore. Let me go out and make friends. Then the pandemic happened, and I'm like, okay, well, I can't go out and make friends anymore, right? So I had time to sit and really think about where I messed up the past year, and now I'm here, I guess. It's 2022, almost 2 years after that happened, which is insane once again. But it was around this time where I realized that I really hadn't been making connections with people, I guess, because, you know, I would just go home. And I found that a lot of people just kind of stopped talking to me around this time because people just got busy with other things. It wasn't because of me or anything. It was just, I'm not a physical presence in people's lives anymore. So they kind of just put me in the back of their mind because I'm not a priority, obviously. I wasn't asking to be a priority, but that's just the way it is when you're not physically there with people anymore. It's not like these people just don't care about me anymore. It's just there's other things that they have to do. And it's not like anyone's obligated to talk to you or anything, right? But 19-year-old me didn't know that. And that's something I learned over the course of the pandemic, is that people will move on and you need to move on too. If you stay stuck in the past, you're gonna get left behind. Like that's that Kendrick Lamar song, bro. Shit don't change until you get up and wash your ass, nigga. That song, literally story of my life over the pandemic, right? But that's also the moral of Welcome to the NHK, because Sato feels like he's being left behind by everybody around him, which is a common occurrence for people who are shut-ins, because you're literally shutting yourself in and stagnating and not progressing at all. I think that's the end of the BLACKDISC lore, so let's go ahead and just talk about Welcome to the NHK real quick. So I obviously really related to Sato, but something I really want to talk about that I don't think a lot of people would care to admit is that I really related to Misaki. And I don't know if that's a red flag or not. Do you relate to Misaki? Let me know. But I feel like her role of trying to fix quote-unquote Sato is something that I've honestly tried to do before in the past, because I'm a very empathetic person and I like talking people through their issues, because I talk myself through a lot of issues. That's what I'm doing now. I'm talking myself through a lot of my issues that I've been having. So I'm really helpful and I try to help people. And sometimes I try to help people that don't want nor need to be helped. And I really blame myself for that if I can't help people. I'm a very empathetic person. But something that I thought was interesting about her character is that she ties her self-worth to trying to help someone who she feels is inferior to her, which I don't relate to. So don't get that twisted, okay? I'm not, maybe the red flag is, you know, not a red flag anymore, but I don't relate to that at all. But I do relate to her trying to quote-unquote fix Sato. The thing is, she wants to tie her self-worth to helping Sato out because obviously, like I said, she views Sato as inferior. And when Sato doesn't need her help anymore, she tries to, you know, off herself, right? Which is crazy. I was like, that, what? She's like, I'm not needed anymore. But I'll bring that back. I do think that her wanting to feel needed is something that I also relate to as well. I'm pretty good at a lot of things, so people typically come to me when they need help, and I like feeling needed. Don't use that against me. I do like feeling needed, and I rarely say no to anybody. don't use that against me. But if somebody asks me to do something, I will literally do everything I can to help them out, especially if I like them. You know I like you if I go out of my way to help you with literally anything. Again, don't use that against me. But yeah, I really thought Misaki's character, outside of her trauma, I guess, was very relatable. I also like how her entire character was recontextualized by the end, where we thought that she was just trying to help Sato out and that her life was together, but she obviously had issues. I knew that she had issues at the very beginning because I was like, why is she so desperate to try to help him out? Because it was that she had her own issues too, and I kind of saw that before it even was revealed to us. But if you didn't see that, it really recontextualized her character, and you can go back and watch it and see that. But I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that she had issues, like with her wanting to help out Sato as much as she did. But as for Sato, I really felt like Sato's character was that he obviously had potential, and he could easily fix all of his issues if he just got up and did it. And that's the whole point. I feel like that's the thing for a lot of shut-ins and hikikomoris, is that you can literally fix most of your problems. There were people who literally could not fix some of their problems, like Yamazaki's issue with his life being planned out. I thought that he was just gonna be like succumb to that issue, but he got over it, whereas Sato didn't. Hitomi, or Senpai, she got over her issues and she had a nice life at the end too. He didn't. And I think that's why people thought that it was very depressing, or that this anime was depressing, is that the ending didn't really resolve anything. But you know, it's obviously depressing, but I didn't think it was depressing because it's a cautionary tale. You don't want the bad ending, you want the good ending for yourself. So I wasn't like, man, that was so depressing, like nothing will ever change. I was like, no, he messed up and he had the bad ending for himself, so he could have fixed it. You can fix it yourself personally, you the viewer. So that's why I was like, this isn't as depressing as people make it out to be, is what I felt like Welcome to NHK was, because it was a happy ending, just not for the protagonist, but only because he didn't choose the happy ending. Also, going back to my topic of convenient relationships, Misaki and Sato's relationship at the end is really only out of convenience, and they don't need to have that relationship. Like they really should just talk to somebody else, or just like get over their issues, or talk to somebody else. Instead, they just accompany themselves with misery, because you know the saying is misery enjoys company, meaning that if someone else is having the same issue as you two are most likely to stick together instead of actually going to get help for each other, which is the point of the ending of the series. Also, big thing that I forgot to mention is that Sato will go out of his way every episode to help everybody else, but he simply just cannot help himself. And I really resonated with that, because I feel like a lot of people have come to me for help or advice. Like I said with the Misaki section, I'm really an empathetic person. I try to help everybody, so people come to me for advice or for help, and I can help them. So to kind of wrap this video up, in terms of what I've learned, not from Welcome to the NHK, but what really reinforced what I learned before I even watched this, was one, nobody's gonna come and save you. There is no Misaki in real life, and if there is, they're probably, they probably have issues too, right? That's kind of a point one. Point two, get off your ass, bro. Just go do what you want to go do and stop feeling sorry for yourself. That's the thing. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Nobody's gonna come save you. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Just get up and do it. You can feel down, you can feel unmotivated, but don't let that stop your entire life, right? But overall, I feel like I've said everything I need to say about this. I really mainly wanted to talk more about my relation and my experiences around the topic rather than the actual anime itself. So if you feel like there's more I could say about Welcome to NHK, let me know. If you feel like there's less I should say about myself, if I make this into a video, let me know. Me personally, I feel like this works better as just a raw video. If I needed to add anything in this video, it would most likely just be Welcome to the NHK stuff. And that was the whole point of the video, was just so I can mainly talk about myself and my own experiences rather than, again, the actual series itself. That was episode 1 of Real Shit. So do you like this format? Let me know. You think it could be improved in some way? Do you think I should just stick to scripted stuff? I just went out of my head with this one. It was really just a test, so your feedback is really appreciated. I think personally what I should do is just write down some notes this time, because I really felt like it was very unstructured towards the end. I didn't talk a lot about Welcome to N.H.K, but any episode following this one that I do is not going to be as heavy, for sure. This is probably the heaviest video I will ever make. Like, probably ever. I'm never this serious, but I think about this stuff a lot, and this was an issue that I've been having for years, so I really wanted to talk about it. But next episode, I think what we're going to talk about is just fighting games that I played over the pandemic. So we'll see how that goes, but if you watch the video all the way through, thank you, and I'll catch you next time.